Greetings. We are living in unprecedented times of global disruption and chaos, and it becomes incredibly important to know how to future-proof and survive. Given increasing uncertainty in the Gulf of Hormuz, the Middle East, and Ukraine, and other unprecedented wars and chaos, given pandemics, climate change, natural disasters, illegal fishing, pollution, oil spills, marine and invasive species, political tensions, cultural divides, alienation raised by social factors, climate instability, AI technology disruption, and the combined pressures of 0.86 billion people, of 8.6 billion people on this planet. There can be no denying that these are unprecedented and uncertain times for the fate of our species. Our ocean just recently has experienced unprecedented temperature change, and the question is, how does our environment adapt to prevail and survive and even flourish amid such uncertainty and turbulence? So, today, if there's one thing that unites us, each and every one of us, our societies, our supply chains, our economies, our communities, as families, as individuals, as nations, is the fact that we are all part of a greater planet. Over 70% of our Earth depends on the ocean, and its increasing health and survival should be a concern and question to us all. Given that over 90% of the world's trade depend on the ports, shipping, supply chains, and underlying ecosystems, how do we ensure that we prosper and not merely survive against such uncertainty? So today, I, Dr. Jack Dyer of Blue Economy Future, am launching this podcast on how to create a blue, green, sustainable economy future, how to prevail, how to sustain, and so on. Because I believe that with over 70 countries worth of experience, given a background as a consultant, an activist, a youth, an innovator, and a policy maker, I believe that there is a way forward and a chance for us to future-proof against emerging disruption. And that is the basis of this podcast today. Today marks the dawn of a new chapter, the culmination of major experience. As a youth, I first realized many years ago that there's increasing disruption, that we're living in an increasingly fragmented ecosystem, which does not connect the policies, the youth, the policymakers, and the people who govern our decisions with the top CEOs, with the consultants, with the communities, with the NGOs and activist movements, with the startups, the businesses, the innovative talent and solution ideas, to us, to regular people. As consumers and producers, each and every one of us has a stake in this planet. But how do we survive? How do we prevail? And what more can we do about it? So if you want to get in touch with me at any point, these are my contact details. But I was personally inspired to say that I've learned a lot over my experiences of my life and future. And above all else, I have been motivated by the core need to not only just listen to what politicians are saying, but play an active role and to support those who want to play an active role in bringing this fragmented ecosystem together and building a great network of change. So in this initial podcast, revamping some of the previous ones that I've done, the first part will be to focus on the very basics of what does it take to be employable, what does it take to prosper, and what does it take to succeed in life? And that will be a subject for future podcasts, in this series. But it'll also this initial podcast will be focusing on how do we even get a foothold in the door? How do we become accessible? How do we become employable? What are the key basic life skills that they don't tell you about, but we really need to know in order to survive? including everything from CVs and interviews to networking and presentation skills. In the second part of this podcast, I'll be focusing on what it really means to make the most of the times and the era that we're living in. That means exploring the concept of the blue or ocean economy, the environment and the associated trends, risks, developments, initiatives, projects, employment opportunities, and other resources needed to really scale and mobilize. In subsequent podcasts, I'll be talking more about different areas of the blue economy, from fisheries to tourism to AI and data technology to renewable energy to fisheries to conservation to ports, shipping and supply chains, and alternative marine fuels, water energy, water security, and how to respond to emerging risks such as pollution, climate change, natural disasters, and so on. I'll also be talking about the green economy, the circular economy, climate resilience, blue, green, silver economy, and everything else. The purpose of this podcast series in how to create this new green blue economy future and prevail against life's disruption is exactly that. The only way that we can prosper and survive in this world is if we fundamentally understand what it takes to personally succeed in life, to be empowered and become a part of this. And as this process, we really want to know what is going on. As part of this process, it is incredibly important to make the most of the opportunities. It's incredibly important to see what can be done, what does it take not only personally but professionally in terms of the funding, the jobs, the skills, the training, the people to connect to, the ideas that can help save us and generate a market for them, and any insights that we might need into emerging risks, opportunities, and what we can do to accelerate progressive developments. So, part 1. What does it take to succeed in this world and in this life? If there's one thing I've learned is that if you really want to succeed, it helps to make the most of your beginnings or to take advantage of the life and world around you. For example, that could mean going back. So whether you're at school or university, or if you're looking for employment center or benefits or anything else, there are many physical and online resources, including LinkedIn courses, events, even virtual job placements such as on Forage and other opportunities. So you can always get virtual experience, or you can volunteer, or you get practical experience, or you can get some tips on how to prevail and survive. And that includes, from my own experience, when I won the University of Kent Employability of the Year award back in my undergrad days, and focusing on website, and you can focus on websites such as www.kent.ac.uk, the University of South Pacific Career Guidance Centre, or if you're interested in volunteering, conservation, sustainability, and so on, you can look at conservationcareers.com. In this and subsequent podcasts, I'll also be talking about what it really takes to showcase and highlight to future-proof against employment's uncertainty and disruption. It's really helpful to master a few core skills and needs. That way, whatever area you want to do, whatever sector you can do, you'll be able to prevail. In this increasingly digital age, it helps firstly to be aware of basic IT, technology, website development, computer literacy, and other technologies. Extending this to app development and the usage of AI in appropriate circumstances can also be particularly effective. Depending on what areas you're in, it can also be extremely helpful to know basically about social media, and marketing. It can also, as this can help really elevate and sell yourself, along with basic data and statistics, financial and business, financial literacy, which can really help make you independent financially, so that you can pursue the dreams and projects that you want to do in the meantime, but also along with GIS and data skills. Learning how communication, gender, youth, social safeguarding, risk management, and so on can also help you in terms of engaging with people and showing that you can manage teams, show leadership and other developments, and then other core skills. And there are many free and other projects available, some of which will be talked about later in this and other podcasts. So, in the beginning, connections. This is very, very important. So, to become personally employable and future-proofed against life's disruption risks, it is incredibly important to maximize the opportunities taken to synergize and connect and link up to other people. As part of this process, it's highly recommended that you remember the phrase, it's not just what you know, but who you know that counts, unfortunately, in this world. And that is why I started off at school with the potential alumni or boys network, but this could be to all girls or gender fluid or anything of your choice. But it is incredibly important to remember that you don't know if the person sitting in front of you or also attending your event as a fellow student or colleague or whatever could in fact be the next head of a major NGO or CEO corporation, could be your immediate supervisor, could be running the business that you'd like to work in, or could even be the next prime minister, president, or secretary, or major figure, or celebrity, or even be able to help you out in terms of a sports or cultural activity or other dream that you want to pursue. So you can engage with, potentially ask and engage with friends, with family, join professional associations, attend events and opportunities. Many businesses and sectors go out to trade recruitment fairs, and if you ask people and if you engage with people, if you join hobbies and activities and so on, that can be really helpful. You can always reach out. Nowadays, people always expect you to have a social media presence. That social media presence also needs to be carefully worked on and developed. As part of this process, if you don't have a digital presence, that will be considered highly suspicious. So make sure that you have one, but also you can look at cleaning it up to make sure that if anybody does reach out to you, that you don't make that happen. And so it's about your digital presence, making sure that you have an active social media and be able to engage with people where possible through LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, or even developing a pod. Also feel free to reach out and connect to people directly, expressing interest in their post, sharing your content, saying what you're potentially interested in, and really showing that you're making an impact. And people often refer, it's better to often connect with people not only through emails, but directly through LinkedIn and social media, because they're more likely to respond to your posts. If there's one thing I've learned, that we should never, one of the great things about living in this era is that it becomes increasingly easy to connect with people through the power of media and social media. And that could mean, just reaching out and seeing what happens. For example, through that, I've learned that engaging with people, talking to them, asking them for advice, having conversations, coming up with sound bites to say what you'd like to do and reach out to people and so on, can lead you to the most unexpected of places, such as for last year when I personally spoke to over 15 heads of state at the United Nations Ocean Conference, or UNOC, in Nice in France last June, and in the same route, and engaging with around 200 heads of state and their representatives as below. So, how do you become employable? How do you become future-proofed against increasing resistance and disaster? Well, I'd have to say that it's extremely, extremely important to make a difference and see what's happening. As part of this process, you have to look at what's happening and where it matters. So first and foremost, if you want to become employable, if you want to see that it really matters and makes a difference, you need to look at preparing a basic CV, cover letter, funding proposal pitch, or whatever else. And to do so and to create a great one, it's really helpful to understand who the company are, what they're doing, and why is it important. And if you understand current affairs and the trends and developments that are affecting the organization at the moment, if you ensure that you can align it to what their interests are and their opportunities, and AI can really help you in this regard. Or else do your homework and do some research, say what you can contribute or matter, or do anything that say what you can contribute or what really is important, and that can really make you stand out. Also, if possible, attend events in person for headhunters and recruiting. Dress to impress, look smart at your interviews and surveys, and make the impact. If you want to just engage with the company first, that can also be really helpful to making sure that you are on their radar and getting past the AI filtered spam mechanisms. If you really want to gain the personal touch and be charismatic and charming, you could reach out in person, drop it off through a professional career or social media, suggest some ideas, ask them for advice, make an impact, and so on. CEOemails.com is a way of contacting major CEOs and businesses for free or can be a subsidized version to find out the contact details of pretty much every major industry CEO in the world. If you're working in the Pacific, for example, the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner, SPREP and SPC publish an annual directory of the major stakeholders in the South Pacific, which is really great for networking. Equally, COP is very transparent about publishing its participants, and with COP and UNOT, you can reach out and engage and identify who are the real enablers, movers and shakers, and then reach out to them in person or social media for the climate, environment, sustainability, ocean, media, and policymaker, business, lobbyists, fossil fuel lobbyists, and anybody else that really makes the space from the COP events. But above all, it's about making a personal touch and making an impact. And you can do this in several ways. You can make virtual recordings of your CV and yourself and develop an avatar and podcast and so on, and really come up with an alternative way of creating your CV. Alternatively, when doing a CV, you have to be careful of attachments. You can make sure that you reference the job and try and find ways to block spam. And if possible, make sure that it is a professional email address so as to minimize the chances that it will get rejected. Because there's a lot of times where Gmail, Yahoo, whatever is considered automatically as spam. So if possible, come up with another alternative professional address, whether it's through your uni, college, or any other random factor. It's also very helpful if you, as I say, make a direct outreach in person. And I know it's not easy, but you can always practice in person or virtually. You can also reach out to me at any time or other people and so on, and just really figure out how you can actually engage and talk to people. And hopefully some of the stuff I'll be talking about later will work from you. You can also look at asking people for referrals, asking people for advice, experience, and anything else that can really help you to become more employable and making reach. And I would say that, if you can boil down what you're interested in, what you want to do in a minute or two, and then go into greater detail, you never know when a chance acquaintance might become useful. I've found people that have become useful just standing in queues, whether it's at airports or conferences or events. I've met into people in the most unexpected of places, and you can offer to help them, they can offer to help you. Maybe they can refer you to others as well. And if you are willing to express interest in what they're doing, if you listen to what they say and whatever, if you help them, potentially they can help you. I started off in consulting by first of all identifying jobs, tenders, opportunities, which I thought were really interesting, and then volunteering to partner with bigger organizations. or individuals. I also started as helping NGOs and startups and co-developing NGOs and startups by finding grants and other funding opportunities, co-developing incubator, accelerator, co-supporting people to be part of incubator, accelerator programs, and everything else. I would also say, highly, that it's very important to consider who and what and how and when and why is really important. Is that there are others out there, such as potential gatekeepers of knowledge, who are really important and significant. Please do not underestimate these people, as they have a lot of power, a lot of potential influence as gatekeepers, whether security guards, gatekeepers, and so on. The people who actually, so make friends with them, make friends with the security guards, make friends with the PAs, make friends, try to get on with the people around you and above you and so on, or even wherever, because you never know who might actually influence your chances of a promotion, of a job, of a training opportunity, of a funding application, or even just gaining simple access. Because, if you can even get the foot in the door, virtually or physically, that can really help. So it's all about, so how does it work to become very personally employable and future-proof against disruption risk? Well, there are a couple of areas that one could talk about, but above all else, it's about making an impression. It's all about being visible, making a perception, and not being obscure. You have to find a way to stand out, and increasingly where AI filters out a lot of applications, where people spend no more than a few seconds on a CV or so on, it's making those connections, it's showing interest beforehand. Whether through social media, whether it's through espousing idea or motivation, why you want to do something or so on, that can really help you to become more aware of what the opportunities are around, which allows you to future-proof against risk and become employable. Additionally, there are different techniques in public speaking and engagement. So when I spoke to heads of state, for example, I would go out there, or public or eminent speakers such as Sylvia Earle or any other random entity. You can reach out to people directly by going out after an event and sort of talking to them, and be very quick to respond before anybody else has a chance. Intercept, thank them, try and get the contact, share contact details, have a soundbite or two, and make your point really effective. Alternatively, when you can reach out to an event or in person or virtual online, and you actually start engaging with people, sometimes you can just have a mutual discussion, but other times it can be helpful to just have voice prompts, to be silent, to drag them out, to ask them for advice, to share sound bites and opinions. And then, sometimes if you're silent or you don't say much, that can also be really helpful and work in your favor as well, because then people are more likely to listen to you. They're more likely to think that you're agreeable with what they say. It allows you to have potentially a scope for future correspondence, but you've got to show that you're actively aware and engaging and listening. I would say, however, that ultimately this is all up to you. You can, as my final point, is about trusting to make an impact and make a difference. So then I would talk briefly about the next stages of developing a CV. Now, there are many different templates that one could use, and sometimes you have to customize it for every job. You have to run it through an AI filter, but then you have to make it customized in such a way that you are not going to get spat out in about 2 seconds. I've applied to tens of thousands of jobs, received more rejections than could possibly imagine. I've reached out to thousands of people, and I've come across and worked on dozens of different jobs, projects, and assignments, and I can say to you that it also helps to develop the basics. So if you want to succeed in life, making sure that you spend a bit of time on your CV is worth it, although sometimes it can take several hours if you really want to go and work for certain organizations. So is ensure that you think of all your hobbies, all your activities, any language skills, any programs, any interests, anything that makes you stand out. And you can always develop volunteering skills, you can always sign up for courses, you can also find other ways, undertake jobs and so on, to see if there's any way that makes you stand out from the average person. So the ideas of a standard CV is generally no more than 1 to 6 pages at most. It helps to have a good formatting. If you need help, there's professional AI algorithms, there's professional development services, but there are a lot of free resources on college and university websites. Just make it simple and easy to read. It's best not to totally exaggerate. It's sometimes helpful if you can have CVs or so on, but the main point is that you should be highlighting your achievements so that in a subsequent interview you could talk about some of your major successes, talk about some of your failures or weaknesses, and what you learned from those processes. So as part of this, what they're really looking for is to see what sort of skills you have, and that could mean anything from problem solving to teamwork to basic calculation to do you have leadership potential, leaderships or other skills. Do you have are you continuously learning and evolving and having a track record, or are you trying to remember things? I'd also say that it's extremely helpful to say what makes you stand out from the average person. And people, they're always looking for something different. So if you do a bog standard CV, this makes you have a far less of a chance to actually get supported and endorsed. And in your cover letter as well, it's really helpful to, as I said before, show your interest. Most cover letters are no more than 1 to 3 or 4 pages. This is a chance for you to highlight the situation, the task, the awareness, response, and how you fit each and every one of the job criteria through examples. This is where you can showcase why you really want to work for the company organization. This is where you can talk about progressive career development to show that you have short or long-term interest, that you're aware, you're flexible, you're enthusiastic. And if there's something that you've seen about current affairs or that you know about a company which prompted you to work for a company, or if you have a thing that says that might help improve it, or an idea that you want to pursue or something, or anybody that referred you to the company, it's a good thing you can mention. You can mention them by name, you can mention opportunities, you can mention areas, and this will make you sound more available, flexible, enthusiastic, and passionate, and it's more likely to actually be read. You can get AI to screen and filter some of this, but of course, employers are increasingly aware of these opportunities. So, if it highlights some of these major skills, because people will be interested if you can multitask, negotiate, if you can persuade people, if you're focused and goal-driven, and you have some various skills. But in your CV, it's also helpful to talk about, the STAR method. So situation, task, action, response. So the situation was, what was the circumstance, or what was the project or everything being about before you got involved, or the job or everything else. The task was basically your job description and what was you had to show different roles and responsibilities and what you think you could have achieved in all this process. Then you have action, and action is about deciding what you actually did to fulfill the job. How did you prove yourself? What examples can you give of concrete things that you did to fulfill the job description? What did you learn from the process? What are the successes? What are the failures? And that is the response, was what impact did it make? What was the influence or the impression, and what was your role important, and why did it actually make a difference? As part of the employability skills, I'd also highlight these as potential other examples. You might have driving, you might know how to use certain software, hardware, equipment, such as being a forklift driver. You might have a pilot license or a driver license. You might have volunteered or won a prize or joined something at school, uni, or anything else. It could be online, it could be in person. The point is that most employers are always increasingly looking forward to show that you have more than just the basic minimum and requirements. In the interviews, they may ask you a number of different things. The best way to prepare for an interview is to do a number of the virtual ones available, to practice with friends, families, or peers, and to ask what sort of skills developments and opportunities can be made. So the questions that you have to ask yourself is to consider, Why is this important, and what does it actually mean? So you have to ask. And that extends to teamwork, leadership capacity, project management skills, including budgeting, administration, proposal development, monitoring, reporting, and valuation, good organization, planning, time management, and other basic skills. In an interview process, it helps, if you know them, to research not only the organization, but as soon as you're told about the interview panel, reach out and connect to them and follow the company through media or social media. It's also good to highlight the brief 15 to 30 minutes interview to highlight why you really want to be involved, or to show some passion and conviction. And through this and throughout the hiring process, and even when you're in the organization angling for a promotion, it's really helpful, as I say, to allow for effective presentation, communication, and networking, because you never know what might lead you to a promotion or an opportunity. This can apply for your funding grants as well. If you're putting in a pitch for a startup, for an innovation, for a NGO or anything else, or a business idea. And there'll be more of that in subsequent talks. So it's all about saying who you are, why you want to do it, what does matter, and so on, and making that impact. Additionally, so as I said before, the other part of the interviews is the process before and after. So when you're ending an interview, they often ask you for 1 or 2 questions. Prepare those ahead. Often I ask questions along the lines of, okay, so how would you measure success in this particular role? What are you looking for? Or I understand that the job description says this, but what additional might there be? What are the scopes for development or expansion or anything else? This shows that you're interested, that you've researched, and you have committed to the company and the process, and that you have a long-term, genuine interest in the process. And a final question can be about next steps and timeframes, and try and get them to commit to a follow-up. Also ask for any feedback, both this and then subsequently when you're thanking them for their time, from a follow-up email, which is always a good, polite thing to do and makes an impression. If you get rejected, however, I've been rejected from thousands of things. I've been accepted by dozens. The main thing is that to be careful not to overreact, at least in a way that could damage future chances. So don't complain. Don't complain to them because they're not particularly interested. If you want to know about handling rejection, there are many different ways you can do that, but the main thing is to avoid trying to burn your bridges, dashing off anything in anger or misery. Find out something you enjoy and try and take your mind off it as best you can, and look after your mental and physical health. There may be a reason. It might have an internal candidate, there might be some other thing for the job, or there just may be thousands of other applicants, or perhaps it was just meant to be and there's something better you can do. But the point is, there's a lot of different opportunities out there and factors that you could actually use to make an impression. Also, I'd also say that in general, about networking opportunities before we move on to presentation skills, that's incredibly important to make the most of what you're doing. I personally take the time and effort to respond to every email, even if it's just saying no or I'm not interested, dismissing it, and to personally contact, engage, reach out, and so on, filter through every single one of my social media connections that wants to engage. I try my best to respond to them, potentially show interest, and if time permits, have a discovery call. Because a lot of the time, there are opportunities that come presented through emails, through cold outreach, and so on, and people don't respond. They don't engage. They don't, even when people offer them help or offer them an opportunity or are willing to do a discovery call, it's amazing how few people actually take advantage of that. Even when people are offering to help, and that can work against them in the future, because people think, well, if you've ignored me, even if I follow up and you ignore me, then that can be a problem. So it's often best also to maximize serendipity, and serendipity can be anything you see that turns up, if it's an event or an opportunity or a free course or an application for a grant or anything else, sometimes better to just, even though we're all busy, to somehow look at making the most of the time available. Right, then that leads me to the last part of this presentation of this first part of the podcast on creating a new green and blue economy future and how to future-proof against life disruptions, by focusing briefly on presentation skills. Now, the key task of presentation and communication skills is very, very important, because if you can't engage with people, if you can't sound enthusiastic and motivation, if you can't connect to people, whether it's formally or whether it's informally in a communication environment, this may not help. Now, I realize it's not always practical, and I realize that many people struggle with this, but that is why it's good to practice. You can practice with VR, virtual reality assistants and chatbots and so on. You can practice in person. You can practice virtually online with people offering to help, with friends, with family, with colleagues, and so on. Or you can, seek out professional forums, join societies, clubs, and other mechanisms to do so. Ever since primary school, and grammar school and college, whatever, I've been actively engaged in public speaking, media, social media, marketing, outreach, and debating skills, and so on, right through my school career and even now. So it just gets easier with practice. Many people say there's a fear of death is higher than the fear of public speaking. Well, that again, it is workable. The trick to any good presentation is perhaps sometimes to just prepare in advance, so good presentation or good sound bites or whatever, and to, if necessary, keep practicing until you're no longer reading it off by heart, but that you're actually able to present and project. It also helps to have a great deal of enthusiasm and passion for your subject. If you're not likely to motivate and convince people effectively if you're just going to monotonously read out in a voice and find it in a really dull story. Because many of us have had the lecture experience where we listen to some droning lecturer or person, entity who continuously engages in a monologue and never really allows anybody to chance to speak, and therefore you find it extremely distracting and disruptive and continuously rude if you can never actually have a word to say and concentrate on actually what they're saying, or they find it very interesting that you can never have a chance to say. So you get many kinds of speakers, but allowing for pause, allowing for interaction, allowing for eye contact and engaging with the audience, having a good formatting and so on, and making sure that you can project your voice in the right forum is also very helpful. So there are a number of core tips. If you really want to know more about this, there can be more about this in future podcasts, but I'd also highly recommend the 1930s classic of Dale Carnegie's book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, which still remains a classic. Or if you really want to get more organized and learn about presentation, communication, and friendship skills, you get the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, or by Sean Covey, and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, among other motivational books, TED Talks, podcasts, and other great tools. So, the good news to remember is that there are many templates available, so if you're looking for an idea or a solution or a process, there are many different organizations that have examples of grants, of bids, of CVs or projects or anything else that have opportunities available. If you have a cause or a campaign or a business site, if you have a cause, a campaign, want to be part of an NGO or major movement, this is just some examples from the oceans, climate, blue economy, environment space, but there are many others. You can network with business if you're a major industrial CEO and so on through World Ocean Council, for example. If you're worried about pollution and want to be involved, there's the International Coastal Cleanup. Greenpeace is very active, as is Oceana and Sea Shepherd in terms of enforcement against the environment. Global Fishing Watch if you want to know about fisheries, and even protecting. And if you're a youth and you want to become an entrepreneur or an activist or anything else, the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, EU, Blue Youth, and so on. There are a number of different organizations that are committed to helping us fellow youth. So, part 2. And that leads me to part 2 of this podcast, the blue economy. Increasingly perceived as the next investment frontier, the future of our oceans is critical for the future of sustainable impact investment, along with our natural capital and interconnected ecosystems. It's increasingly considered as one of the great returns of interest of our age, in addition to AI and innovative technology, climate, and other sustainable technologies. As part of this, it's increasingly important to consider that if nothing else, this frontier offers significant numbers of trillions of dollars and 45 million jobs over the next 5-10 years to become one of the great opportunities for anybody who's saying, well, how can we link the environment and business together? Of course, managing these opportunities and identifying them will be a subsequent part of this and future podcasts. But as part of that, it's also increasingly important to be aware of the major threats and how some of these threats can be turned into opportunities. For example, over 90% of coral reefs, which supply over 70-80% of all the fish species and provide up to 90% or more of certain small island development states or large ocean states economies, could die by 2050. Then there's giant continent-sized garbage patches of at least 5 of those, approaching the size of Australia, floating around the world's oceans. And then there's the dramatic disruption costs caused by illegal and overfishing, causing huge risks of potential species collapse, among other threats. This makes the blue economy increasingly important to be considered, because as over 90%, and in some cases over 95 to nearly 100% of goods services for many countries rely on the fundamental underlying marine ecosystem and resources, which are incredibly threatened with potential collapse. And thus, if we want it can no longer be considered business as usual as the oceans become close to collapse. But rather than doom and gloom, I show that it is incredibly important through this podcast and through subsequent podcasts to pay attention to these protecting and valuing these ecological, economic, social, cultural research, ocean climate stabilization, and other core risks, because they're increasingly necessary for trade, for income, for food security, for energy, for water, for oxygen, and other core resources, and even to protect our coastlines and major heritage from disruption. We cannot escape that we are living in an increasingly interconnected world with very little scope for resilience. The concept of just-in-time production means that we're never more than a couple of days away from a major crisis that can paralyze the entire chain. This was demonstrated during the COVID-19 pandemic, but has also been more recently through the 6-day disruption caused by the blockage of the Evergreen container ship in the Suez Canal, and even more recently through the Gulf of Hormuz and the Middle Eastern crisis, upon which much of our fuel, food, fertilizer, and other commodities trade through. If there's anything that, of course, some of the biggest risks to this must also be to this achieving of a sustainable blue, green, and new climate future, is to identify what are the major risks, the impact costs, more importantly, to focus on the solution and what each and every one of us can do to play a part of it, because we have only one planet and we have no other alternatives. So, First and foremost is human population growth and pressure control, population control with over 8.6 billion people. We were never meant to, our planet cannot cope with 8.6 billion people who want the lifestyle of California and Hollywood, not at its current unsustainable rate of consumption. There are many great and innovative solutions at which to reduce our impact, but we have to do this in such a way and at such a speed and scale that is unprecedented, and that requires every one of us. For example, other factors include illegal fishing, seabed mining, coastal erosion, and so on, and the unprecedented rate of species discovery, but also species collapse. When I was on top, and of course we all have a role to play in an impact, it was quite horrifying to realize just how much people are at risk. When I was standing on top of Mount Vailima in Samoa, Robert Louis Stevenson's tomb, I saw this motivational poster, and it really hit to me a few years ago that it can take nearly 2 million years for glass bottles to turn it back into sand. It can take 1,000 years for so-called non-biodegradable plastic bags to reduce, or even longer, and 500 years for children's nappies or diapers. But of course, and the huge problem of waste in these Pacific Islands, of secondhand clothing and other materials that just go one way and then are nearly burying these islands, really makes it important that we need to act to consider redesigning our economies and societies to be more efficient, more sustainable, cost effective, better for the planet, better for us as a species, better for our health and as individuals. Because do we really need so much stuff? That is a question to also consider. But of course, the biggest risk of all, and the one that's really important, is the risk of apathy. Too often I've heard that we cannot do anything, or that we shouldn't be doing anything, and I beg to differ. I say that if we don't make the effort to do what's right, to do what's necessary, and to do whatever, no one else can be trusted to do it for us. We've had too many, and that is why one has to cringe every time a missile or bomb goes up, because that is causing accelerated heating of the ocean, accelerated pollution, and is not really solving the problems. Many wars just drag on, and the huge ecological, migration, human and social and political cost does lead a number of wars to be in query. But the biggest risk of all, of course, as I said, is human apathy and indifference, because if we don't care about any of these problems, we have no alternative. We have no plan B. Short of getting onto space, short of going under the ground and the layers of the earth in giant silos, or going on artificial islands or underwater habitats, those of us inland are vulnerable. Even if we think that we can escape the consequences, even if we're wealthy enough and affluent enough, and even if we are miles from the coast, or vulnerable zones, even if we stockpile and have bunkers, we're still likely to be very vulnerable to the actions of others. Migration has already increased in an unprecedented rate, causing significant displacement and disruption socially, politically, economically, environmentally, as illustrated in the case of CERTA, as in the case of politics in the US, the Middle East, and the climate refugees of the South Pacific and everything else, where people are giving up their homes, their communities, their lives, etc., only to relocate to other nations on the basis of climate, geopolitical, and other related economic, social, and other related uncertainty. So if we think we can escape directly, we may still face the huge indirect costs of those fleeing from vulnerable areas. Besides, given that it takes millions of years for sand beaches to form, or for seabed minerals and nodules to form, for it can take significant time for fisheries ecosystems to recover, and given the disruption that can be caused when an event happens, such as storms leading to huge amounts of pollution, cluttering up and disrupting the largest southern port in the southern hemisphere in Durban with yachts and so on, and cargo ships and so on, or losing out mass tourism, coastal protection and shelter because of illegal sand mining, such as in West Africa, such as causing mass unknown species extinction that could cause us to live for 150 years or more in perfect health, solve Alzheimer's, cancer, diseases, and everything else through biotechnology, from allowing potentially offshore oil and gas and fossil fuels and seabed mining and so on. Then, of course, not learning from those who are making progress is also a huge risk. So we have countries such as the UK and France and the challenges of bottom trawling, which, as in Sir David Attenborough's recent documentary, is really important to about the role of protecting our oceans and so on. But then there's also the need for us to learn from the people. The idea about this podcast is to learn from the people and the nations that are really making a difference so that we can future-proof against these risks. For example, several years ago, I've been looking at what countries such as China are doing to really, and I've been going there in person, received a personal tour, and even subsequently onwards, to really see what countries like China and America are doing in the innovation space. If we want to understand what the opportunities associated with the blue economy, it's very helpful to remember what is the distinction between the ocean and the blue economy. The ocean economy is the traditional method which focused on short-term extractive profit, where it was just business as usual, try and maximize the fish, the ports, the trade, the repair, the students, the maximum number of tourism visitors, etc., that your infrastructure and services and employment and other constraints could take. However, with the emerging blue economy, it's important that there are emerging job, employment, investment, and business idea opportunities in multiple different things, from eco conservation and restoration rewilding, blue carbon biodiversity credits and other blue finance mechanisms, to renewable energy, biotechnology and bioprospecting for food, feed, energy, materials, fertilizer, and so on, along with marine research and technology applications such as autonomous vessels, desalination, underwater data centers, and cooling, alternative marine fuels such as biofuels, bioenergy, hydrogen, liquefied natural gas, and cabotage or owning vessels, and of course AI technology, robotics, app developments, virtual reality tourism, and virtual reality experience, and other sustainable mechanisms, industrial and other sustainable tourism, among other really exciting fields. So in subsequent podcasts, I'll go into more detail about who, what, where, how, and why you can benefit and become more employable in creating this new green blue economy future. But I just wanted to focus briefly on some of the major core opportunities that arise from sustainable fisheries, aquaculture, and MPA or marine protected area opportunities. That can be in terms of developing and supporting the supply chains. That can be in terms of raising or generating the species such as coral, fish, feeds, seagrass, mangroves, and other such species. It can mean looking at applications such as jewelry, cosmetics, biotechnology, and so on, the aquarium trade or whatever, to make it sustainable, traceable seafood, and of course protection, working to work with tourists, working to do the research, working on the ranges and enforcement and protection and monitoring, or in the administration of these protected areas. It can mean also a number of different tourism roles, such as developing guidebooks and apps and working administratively to protect underwater marine heritage, whether it's natural or shipwrecks or diving or so on. It can also mean looking at coastal areas. But there's also offshore oil and gas, renewable energy, alternative marine fuels, and other different ways in which it's potentially possible to get employment and supply those people and throughout the entire supply chain. So there are many, many different opportunities involved in this space. And I think that's what we really want to highlight, that even if you're engaged in research, education, training, and so on, you have so many opportunities to make a difference in this space, whether creating a business, being part of an existing organization, championing a cause, or doing anything else. So we're living in really exciting, unprecedented times. Right. So if we really want to make progress in the blue economy, it's incredibly important to realize that anything that you want to do, anything that you believe in doing, can be supported or funded. If you really want to be inspired at how much progress we're making to actually save our planet from the land and marine protected areas, you could go on to MPA Atlas and check out or protectedplanet.net and check out the progress that we are making in the goal to protect 30% of the world's land and oceans by 2030. We're also trying to map the entire world by 2030, 2050. So if you're looking for funding organization, there'll be more about this in subsequent lectures, but if you're looking for an NGO grant, or if you're a startup or a business or an activist or a large, more established organization, these are some of the many examples that can be used to fund your project or your initiative. That includes funds for NGOs.org and Terra Viva grants directory is one of the most useful, but then there's also fundingtheocean.org, openchannels.org, or particular NGOs such as IUCN, WWF, Pew, charitable trusts, Oceana Foundation, and so on. Or you can do multilateral organizations, or you can do NGOs. Additionally, the encouraging thing is that when I was at UNOC last year and do finance investor forums, there's more and more interest from the traditional finance and investment sector to really get excited and motivated into this space. It's really drawing the attention of people. As part of this process, I would say that you can check out some of these venture capitalists, these startups, these accelerators, these governments, NGOs, banks, sectors, and so on, and see what they really want to invest in, because it's so many opportunities available. So if you have an idea or a project or initiative or anything else, and you want to know more, please attend following podcasts or get in touch with me. If you really want to get involved in this space and make a difference, they also offer great, interesting employment opportunities as well for the future of sustainable initiatives which actually care about creating regenerative land and marine based economies, ecosystems, just, equitable, inclusive communities, and everything else related, while at the same time maximizing the impact and generating a business. Coming up, if you are a startup and you want to create a business as a small, medium, or existing entrepreneur, there are many different tools and resources that you can do, and I'll be talking about this in subsequent podcasts, or please feel free to message me and reach out direct. But I would point out to the tools such as Liquid Grid and Ocean Opportunities Lab, and my own website, www.blueeconomyfuture.org.za, and our continuous LinkedIn and other podcast resources where we talk about what are the startups, the incubators, the accelerators, the free resources available, the funding opportunities, the competitions, prizes, events, and so on, and the people and organizations actively engaged in this space that you may really want to engage with. As a youth, I also developed the World Ocean Council's Global Blue Incubation Innovation Network. There's also, for other youth, the Sustainable Ocean Alliance Accelerator. So there are many different programs depending on where you are that can help you. So if you've never done one of these before, the good news, or if you need help or support, whatever, the good news is that there are multiple different programs and opportunities out there. Please feel free to be in touch with me if you see any others. As we come up towards the end of this podcast, and I thank you for those of you who stayed so far, I just wanted to inspire you with some great examples of what can be done to really maximize and make a difference. So if you take a common product like waste, it can be used for just about anything from skateboards to furniture to bricks and construction to boats to packaging to clothing to furniture to manhole cover and surfboards. So there's almost anything that you can do, and if you, with even the simplest amounts of waste, if you want to benefit from the circular economy, and there'll be more about this later in subsequent podcasts, but you can also check out some of the examples of great companies that are doing interesting and inspiring work in this space, just to say that even out of the trash, you can make a profit, and while proving to help people at the same time. In future podcasts, I'll also be talking about some of the emerging areas that are developing, most notably about not only in the blue economy, but also in the green, circular, climate, and space economies. And as part of this process, I'll be talking about how to value ecosystems and risks, how to make progress, how to look at biotech, how to look at emerging trends such as biotechnology, renewable energy, cables, virtual ecotourism, and so on. AI, digitization, digital twins, how do we protect traditional knowledge and science at the same time is really, really important in innovation. And how do we work towards a sustainable world, whether it's coming up with cleaner, greener, decarbonized shipping, maritime supply chains, and transport, through reforming, improving our industrial processes so that we're more efficient, cost less, and produce less waste, and anything else that might happen. Equally, as we come towards the end, it's also, I'll be talking more about this. You can make money, you can, while saving the environment, being sustainable, and leading to many other social, economic, environmental, and other benefits. For example, there's greater moves towards coming up with more sustainable fisheries through electronic sustainable fisheries, or alternatively through industrial tourism of fisheries and other livelihoods and factories and development and so on, restoring and generating coral, mangroves, seagrass and so on, or even converting seaweed into a number of different applications through biotechnology. You can also develop apps and podcasts, online platforms and developments and so on, not only in the blue economy space but elsewhere. People are seeking more money for virtual tourism, which is a lot lower impact than actual tourism. And then, of course, everything from boat building and repair to the green economy and so on. It's also, you can make more money from catching a fish and releasing it than conventional fisheries methods. So I would also say, as also equally important, that if you want to find out more about some more of what I'm doing, please subscribe to this channel on Blue Economy Future on YouTube and through my website www.blueeconomy.org.za, through LinkedIn posts where I'll be updating people as we are. And please feel free to check any of the other some of the other podcasts that I've got highlighted on this particular side, covering all areas for the blue economy. I'll also be doing linked to courses in areas of coastal zone management, economics, policy, law, technology, innovation, risks, business, finance, career development, and of course many of the different sectors, risks and trends themselves. So moving forward, thank you for listening to my podcast. I hope you're feeling really inspired to create a new green blue economy future. But if you really, and I hope to see you in future subsequent podcasts, presentations, and please engage with me, Dr. Jack Dyer, The Economy Future, on my podcast and website. I also want to say that I'd highly recommend that, it's great to recap through saying the value of networking, of using to improve your CV through volunteer, through developing courses and other employability skills. Check your social media profile, develop it, and make sure that looks professional, engaging, and interesting. Look to friends, teachers, peers, colleagues, whatever, or through your employment about developing several professional references if you don't already. And there are many examples of cover letters, practice interviews, and other techniques that can help guide you through the process. The most important thing, of course, is about being proactive, about being ready to identify what you wish to do and why. And then you can search the organizations, the scholarships, the funding. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to do a campaign. Maybe you want to do a course, and so on. It's good to stay track and subscribe to the news, the newsletters, and continuously evolve and develop your opportunity. Perhaps you want to be a consultant or join the team, or maybe you want to be an activist, and not just as a youth. No matter what age you are, whether you're a teenager or primary school, or whether you're in your 80s or 90s or 100s, each and every one of us can do so. And if there's anything that you or your organization need help in to develop a new green and blue economy future, if you ever just want to bounce some ideas or see how you can future-proof against life disruption, stay tuned not only to news and podcasts, but feel free to reach out to me direct. So that will be it for today for the first podcast, because the standard podcast is on average about 20 to 60 minutes, and we really want to value your time and have it make the most of the opportunity. So you can keep track of my contact details through LinkedIn, through website, through email, through podcast, and everything else. Feel free to stay tuned until the next thing. Have a great week. It's been a brilliant that you have listened. So you've got this far on creating new green and blue economy future, and take care and towards this, how we can become jointly future-proofing against life disruption. Until next time, good luck with all your initiatives. Have a great week. Thank you, and so long. Goodbye. From me, Jack.